Okay, now today is the beginning of the 7th week of our 10 weeks together. It is class number 13 out of the total of 20 that we're going to be spending together. This period is going to be directed to the Greensboro civil rights case, Waller versus Butkovich. This is the first case in American history in which officials from a state or a city police department were held directly liable for colluding with the KKK to murder American civil rights workers. As I say, that if by any chance we get a way to get this open before the end of the class, we'll show you the actual footage. Now, you were assigned the reading of a 6-page summary of the details of what it is that happened. You can go on the internet. You look under Greensboro Massacre. That's what it is colloquially known as, is the Greensboro Massacre. And like the second, third, and fourth entries are video footage, because there were all 3 local television networks were present during the shooting and videotaped the whole thing. So you can see what it is that happened here. Now, up until this point, in the first 12 classes that we have had together, we've discussed in some detail a dozen different cases up to this point. We started with the Black Panther newspaper case that I told you about, with them arresting the kids off the street corners in Boston, the Black Panther newspaper boys or men that were distributing the paper. Then we went to the In re Pappas case of the news journalists, confidential news sources. We went to the Black Panther bombing conspiracy case in New York, the Attica prison case we discussed in some detail, the Pentagon Papers case, the first U.S. Army Regimental Band, and on down through all the way to Silkwood and 3 Mile Island in our last class. A full third of these dozen cases that we've touched on up to this point in class involved the issue of racial discrimination against African Americans. Obviously, the Black Panther newspaper case, the In re Pappas case, as you'll remember, had to do with the riots that took place in New Bedford, Massachusetts, and the special grand jury, state grand jury that was impaneled to try to investigate the potential cause of those riots, to blame them on the Black Panther Party. And then even the Caldwell case, that was the case that was joined with Pappas, had to do with the Black Panthers out in Los Angeles, where one of the Black Panthers at a public speech referring to Richard Nixon said publicly, Lee Harvey Oswald, where are you now that we need you? And there were others, including the A&P case that I told you about that got me terminated from the Cahill firm when the Operation Breadbasket, the ministers and nuns and stuff came in to demonstrate against the A&P offices in New York. But they've all touched on, more or less directly, the issue of anti-black discrimination in the United States. This week, we're going to turn directly to that subject to focus on 2 of the cases that I was directly involved in. Today's is the Greensboro civil rights case in North Carolina, and on Thursday we will deal with the Mayor Eddie Carthan case down in Mississippi. Now, as I say, that you have read the short 6-page synopsis that we gave you to look at. It sets forth some of the facts in that case. There were actually, as it turns out, from a technical point of view, there were 6 written opinions, judicial opinions, that were written relating to this particular case. There was and you can take a look at, you don't have to look at them all, but you might take a look at one of them, which is Judge Bob Marriage's opinion in the trial court case. That's at 588 F period sup period SUPP 909. That's the case of Waller versus Butkovich. That dealt with a whole series of motions that were made by the various Klan members, Nazi Party members, Greensboro City Police Department personnel, the mayor and the officials of the city of Greensboro, the FBI, the Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms Division leadership, et cetera, who are all making motions trying to get out of the case, arguments ranging all the way from just pure, simple sovereign immunity, which is that even if we did do it, there's nothing you can do to us, all the way down to the position that only black people were protected under the Federal Civil Rights Act, and that therefore any of the people that were shot who were not themselves black had no standing to actually file a suit of this nature. And there were a couple other cases that we'll touch on, which had to do with our attempting to get a federal special prosecutor appointed by the Justice Department, actually by the Court of Appeals in D.C., to investigate federal law enforcement criminal wrongdoing. We'll touch on that as we go through here, but there are 6 different opinions that you can get a look at which contain a lot of this information. And not surprisingly, part of what Judge Marriage addressed in response to the motions to dismiss our complaint filed against these people was their assertion that only black people are protected under the Federal Civil Rights Act. And that you can see in there him taking the position, which is the position that we argued in Silkwood, and that is that people who are attacked by a conspiracy to punish them for their exercise of civil rights are in fact protected, as we had argued Silkwood should have been. And in this particular case, we prevailed on that, despite the fact that Judge Marriage did not in fact agree that labor union people, for some reason, were included in that. So there's a lot of legal technicalities that you can take a look at in some of these cases, in some of those decisions. But let's get down to the kind of the drama of this particular case. As I say, you read the facts that have to do with the attack itself. The way we got into this is we had, as you recall, it was in June of 1979 that we won the Karen Silkwood case, and we were basically whisked immediately into the state of Pennsylvania to represent the people of 3 Mile Island, to get seeking a federal court injunction to stop the pumping of the radioactive effluents from the damaged facility into the Susquehanna River. We were involved in that for July and August into early September, when we finally got the Nuclear Regulatory Commission to revoke its earlier authorization to pump the water into the river. And so in late September and early October, we got back into Washington, D.C. And at that point in time, we started being flooded with a series of requests from people throughout the country, public interest organizations, church groups, unions, all kinds of different groups, journalists, organizations, asking us to keep together the team of people that we had put together on an ad hoc basis to do the Karen Silkwood case. As you remember, I was at Jesuit National Headquarters. Sarah was at the National Organization for Women. Other people were with Rolling Stone magazine, some with ABC, some with National Public Radio. The people that we assembled to do this case had done such an extraordinary thing, actually 2 things, back to back, with the Silkwood case, stopping the construction of all new private nuclear facilities, and secondly, stopping the pumping of radioactive water into the Susquehanna River, authorized by the NRC, that people wanted us to stay together. So we gathered at Arupe House, which was the old abandoned convent that we all lived in Washington, D.C., on the grounds of the Franciscan National Monastery, and held a series of meetings and decided that we would, in fact, establish a new 501c3 public interest law office in Washington, D.C. And we were given by the Jesuit order and by the Marian sisters a little cobbler shop, actually, right at the foot of Capitol Hill, right next to by Union Station. That the oldest son in the family was a Jesuit priest, and the oldest girl, the oldest woman, was a nun, a Catholic nun, a Marian sister. Neither one of them were authorized, therefore, to own personal property. So they donated their respective halves of this to us, to give us offices for the Christic Institute. And it was this little old rundown cobbler shop that we started painting up, and it was like out of a bad movie, actually. Started painting it up and digging out the basement so we'd have more space in there, and scrubbing all the mold off and everything. And while we were sitting around, on the weekend of November 3rd, now this is, just get a time frame this, November 3rd of 1979 is 1 year prior to the election where Ronald Reagan and George Bush would be elected President and Vice President of the United States on November 4th of 1980. So on November 3rd of 1979, that Saturday morning is when this attack took place down in Greensboro, North Carolina. We saw the bulletins come in, and we saw on Sunday, the 4th of November, we saw Dan Rather's special news section on this in CBS National News showing the footage of the Klansmen getting out of the cars and shooting down these demonstrators. And we were totally freaked out by this, as was most everybody else around the country. We went into our new offices over at 1324 North Capitol Street at the little cobbler shop on Monday, the 5th of November. And I was upstairs in my office with Lewis Pitts and Rob Hager, two of our other lawyers that were working with us. And we were sitting around at the desks, leaned back with our feet up on the desk, talking kind of war stories about what had happened. We hadn't really had much time to reflect upon all the huge trial, the Silkwood trial, and the 3 Mile Island thing. So we were sitting around kind of exchanging war stories on this. And our telephones were getting installed, the new phones getting installed into this little cobbler shop. And the young fellow that was putting in the phones, this guy with a hard hat and electrical worker from UE, the United Electrical Workers, turned around and he said to us, he said, "Are you guys those guys that did that Silkwood case out in Oklahoma in the 3 Mile Island case?" And we said, yes, that's us. And he said, "Would you please help us?" As it turns out, this fellow was a member of the Workers' Viewpoint Organization. It was a group of boomers, baby boomers around the country that had bonded together, many of whom were professionals. He was a law student at Catholic University Law School. He had withdrawn from law school and joined the United Electrical Workers and had become an electrician to work in the union, the UE union, to help organize blacks and whites and women together into unions because they saw that as the source of basic organizing power in the country. And so he was a member of the Workers' Viewpoint Organization. And it turns out it was the Workers' Viewpoint Organization that had organized the anti-Klan rally down in Greensboro. And so he said, "Look, our people have been arrested." And the news hadn't reported that. The news had reported that there were 6 Klansmen and Nazi members that had been arrested. Turns out there were 14 arrested, but the news had reported there were 6 of them arrested. And it turns out that when they arrested those 6 people, they turned around and arrested 6 of the demonstrators. So that they would have an even set. And the city of Greensboro charged them all with felony rioting, as though they were both equally responsible for what had happened there. And so that he was pleading with us to see if we would agree to come down, because this was only now 2 days since the killings had happened, and that they were scheduling a funeral that was going to be held the following Sunday, and wanted to know if we would come down and meet with the people, go into the jail to try to get them bailed out. And I told them right at that time, I said, "Look, what you've got to do is you've got to file a major federal civil rights lawsuit against all these people. It's perfectly obvious that the police were involved in this thing, that they didn't protect the demonstrators, that you need to file a federal civil rights civil suit against them and move immediately for discovery, because the state officials obviously aren't going to do anything serious. The city officials certainly aren't, because they were directly involved in this thing, and the feds aren't going to do anything about it." And so they agreed that we should go down and meet with them. So we flew down that next day on Tuesday the 6th of November of 1979. Lewis Pitts and I and Father Bill Davis as one of our investigators, and we flew down to go to the funeral march Now, it was extraordinary. There we were in Greensboro, North Carolina, and they were marching right straight down the main street in the city of Greensboro. There were 400 police officers had been brought in to surround the whole area. 400 police officers and 500 National Guard, armed National Guard, were everywhere on the streets with rolling army trucks everywhere. And they had helicopters, like 4 helicopters flying over the parade route at all times with police snipers sitting in the gun seat. They had snipers on top of all of the rooftops. And the Workers' Viewpoint Organization people were armed, came to the demonstration armed, carrying rifles. We marched down the street, we as now their lawyers and they, all the way down through the main street into the all-black cemetery, which they still had there in Greensboro, North Carolina, and were there with them during the funeral. At that time. Now, it became a bit more complicated because in the week following the shootings, the people in Greensboro that were members of the Workers' Viewpoint Organization officially changed their name to the Communist Workers' Party, which from a public relations point of view, if nothing else, made it a little bit more complicated. But so we moved immediately to put together a federal civil rights lawsuit. I contacted Billy Taylor, who'd been our investigator on the Karen Silkwood case, and had been my investigator that was assigned to me at F. Lee Bailey's office earlier, whom I've told you about before. And we began a major investigation to ascertain what it was that was going on. We flew back to Washington, D.C. Bill and some of his fellows that were working with him began the criminal investigation on the ground, a straight-up murder investigation, which is his specialty. And on the 21st of November, Lewis Pitts and I went over to the Justice Department. Now remember, this is November 21st of 1979. This is a year or so before Reagan and Bush come in, so it's the Justice Department is under the control of Jimmy Carter. And it turns out that the head of the Civil Rights Division of the Justice Department was Drew Days III. Drew Days was a young black Yale College graduate who happened to be a fairly close friend of Joe Durham, the chief assistant state attorney for Colorado, who was a classmate of mine at Harvard Law School. And so he and I spoke, and then we went in to see Drew Days. We sat down with Drew and we said, look, it's going to be really important here in the time period that Carter is in for sure for you to initiate a major federal criminal civil rights investigation of all of those people down there, not only the Klan and the Nazis, but the police department and anybody else that was involved in this thing. And he said, look, he was completely sympathetic with that, but from a matter of policy, they had to wait for the state, since the state had filed criminal charges against these Klan and Nazi guys. They had to give them a chance to have a fair trial and to decide whether or not they were going to be convicted of the state charges. And so we had to wait. He said the trial was scheduled to begin in about 6 months in June of 1980, and we had to wait. And so we waited and waited and waited until November 4th of 1980, when the election took place, and Carter was defeated, as you know, largely because of this October surprise, this whole thing where we've now established that the chairman of the campaign committee for the election of Reagan and Bush, Bill Casey, had a series of meetings with the Hezbollah people over in Paris and in Madrid, and had struck an agreement getting them to agree to hold those hostages until after the election in the United States, so as to make Carter look like he was impotent and unable to effectively protect Americans. And when Ronald Reagan came to office on the 21st of January, there was literally a split screen going on during the oath of office, where Reagan sitting with his hand on the Bible, taking the oath of office. In the other frame in the television was the American hostages being released. A totally choreographed operation. But the bottom line is that 10 days after the election of Ronald Reagan and George Bush, an all-white jury, state jury in Greensboro, acquitted all of the white Klansmen and Nazi Party members on the theory that they couldn't figure out who fired the first shot. Even though, as you will see, if we can ever get this thing going, the footage, as we proved in our case, you could tell very easily that the fellow got up in the front, right at the very front, stood up, leaned out of one of the windows of one of the Klan cars, and fired a pistol into the air, which was the signal for all of them to withdraw from their physical attack on the demonstrators and rush back to the cars and take their guns out of the cars and start shooting everybody. And we established that in our case, and it was perfectly clear that the district attorney of Greensboro could have proven that, but he didn't do that, and they were all acquitted. And so we went in immediately, actually on November 21st of 1980. This is 1 year, basically, to the day when we had first gone in to see Drew Days, the head of the Justice Department Civil Rights Division, and confronted him and said, look, see, you sat around for the whole year, and now there they are, you know, that they've acquitted all of them, and now Carter has lost the election, and you guys are here in this kind of lame duck session here from November to January. You know, you'd better damn well get this investigation started now, because when the Bush administration comes in, it's very unlikely that they're going to do anything to try to prosecute, you know, anti-black organizers in North Carolina. Actually, Drew Day's assistant was sitting there with us, and he said, no, I don't really anticipate any overt racist attitudes on the part of the Justice Department after Reagan and Bush take over. And Drew Days turned to us and said, excuse me, don't count me in on that sentiment, he said. And so he did begin. He ordered the beginning of a major investigation, and on December 15th, just about less than a month later, he recommended the filing of federal criminal charges under the Federal Civil Rights Act against the Klan and Nazi members. And on the 21st of December, the previous Carter-appointed U.S. attorney in North Carolina, in that area, Michael Michelou, announced the filing of criminal charges, federal criminal charges against these Klan and Nazi men. But when Reagan and Bush came into office on the 21st of January of 1981, what they did is they amended the charges, and what they said is that the people would not be considered guilty of a violation of the Federal Civil Rights Act unless it could be proven that the sole and exclusive reason for any one of them being shot was simply because they were black. And they disallowed they didn't allow a jury to come to any conclusion that if they attacked someone because they were protesting anti-black activities on the part of the Klan, that they could recover. If they were white people actually assisting and standing up for the rights of blacks and were assaulted because of it, they couldn't recover. What happened is the Reagan and Bush administration, you know, imposed upon the Federal Civil Rights Act this extraordinarily narrow reading of the Federal Civil Rights Act, which was setting it up for them all to be acquitted. So what we did is on March 24th of 1982, we sent a memo, which I wrote to William French Smith, the Attorney General under the Reagan and Bush administration, and set forth a series of specific facts that had been generated from our investigation to demand that a special prosecutor be appointed. He disregarded that entirely. And so we invoked the provision of the new Ethics in Government Act that was passed after the Nixon administration, after Nixon had fired Special Prosecutor Archibald Cox. There was a federal piece of legislation passed setting forth objective criteria that would require the Attorney General to appoint a special prosecutor. So we invoked that and began a campaign to try to get them to appoint a special prosecutor to investigate the wrongdoing on the part of not just the Ku Klux Klan and Nazi Party members, but the Greensboro Police Department and others, because what we had done is we had gone to the former United States Attorney that had been appointed by the Carter administration after he left office and was replaced by a Reagan-Bush appointee. And he explained to us what had happened, that in his position as U.S. Attorney, he had come to know that what had happened here, and this is what happened, is that, and everybody thought it was pretty spectacular that we were able to figure out all this kind of stuff, and they never did realize that we were talking directly to the former U.S. Attorney who was in charge of filing civil rights counts against these people if he hadn't have been replaced by the Nixon or the Reagan-Bush administration. So he explained to us that what had happened is that the American Nazi Party in Greensboro, North Carolina, had been in communication with the 2506 Brigade down in Miami, Florida, the anti-Castro Cubans that were involved in Operation 40, the ones we've talked about before in connection with the Kennedy assassination, that the 2506 Brigade was reported to be supplying automatic weapons to the American Nazi Party in various southern states, including full 50 caliber machine guns. And that because of that, that he had tried to initiate an investigation of the American Nazi Party. And what happened was that the regional director of the Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms Division, a guy by the name of Robert Dukes, had recruited an Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms Division agent by the name of Bernard Butkovich from Cleveland, Ohio, and had brought him into North Carolina, and he had infiltrated the American Nazi Party in North Carolina, and that he had become a very vocal and strident member of the American Nazi Party. And it turns out that the FBI had a paid informant by the name of Eddie Dawson, was inside the Ku Klux Klan. And he had actually been so aggressive and racist in his activities that he'd been promoted to be the Black Hawk, or the Nighthawk, rather, the Nighthawk for the Ku Klux Klan in North Carolina, which is their chief of security. So the FBI had the chief of security functioning for the Ku Klux Klan, and the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms had this kind of strident advocate of Nazism inside the American Nazi Party. And so what happened is that a group of baby boomers who were medical doctors, actually, from New York City and Chicago and some other places, they had organized and come down to North Carolina because of the major problem in North Carolina with the textile mills. The textile mills in North Carolina are filled with cotton dust in the processing. The air is completely filled, opaque almost, with cotton dust. And they had no labor unions. North Carolina ranks 50th in the United States in organized labor. And they had no labor unions for health and safety protections. And so there was the highest level of brown lung disease in the entire country in the textile mills in North Carolina. And so these young doctors from around the country had gone into North Carolina and had started setting up clinics to try to get the workers to come and get tested for brown lung and to explain to them the need for respirators and trying to get them to organize to get the plants to provide health protection for them. They found that it wasn't very effective, and so what happened is a dozen of these doctors and college professors, you know, with PhD degrees and medical degrees, quit their profession and went into the mills to work on the line, to be mill workers with these people, and stood side by side with them trying to organize a chapter of the Amalgamated Clothing and Textile Workers, to organize a labor union in the major mill in Greensboro. And they were organizing the union irrespective of race or gender, that they were recruiting blacks and whites and women and men on a completely equal basis to try to organize this union. And so what happened was that the Ku Klux Klan organized and realized what was going on at the plant, and the Ku Klux Klan began to picket the plant with signs saying "Death to Niggers" and "Death to Nigger Lovers," and calling them all communists. And so the Workers' Viewpoint Organization decided that what they were going to do, the Workers' Viewpoint Organization found out that the Ku Klux Klan was going to be showing a movie called Birth of the Nation, which is this fantastically famous racist movie from back in the 30s that in fact glorifies the Ku Klux Klan, the whole movie. And so they were getting set to show the movie, and so the Workers' Viewpoint Organization people all gathered and demonstrated against it. And they gathered at this civic center where the Klan was showing this movie, and they all chanted and shook their fists at them and basically picketed the place and kept people from coming to see the movie. And the Ku Klux Klan was furious about this, and they held a meeting and went to a farmhouse outside, about 30 miles outside of Greensboro, and they gathered together, and the Klan and the Nazi Party organized themselves together, and Bernard Butkovich was there wearing a body mic, and Eddie Dawson was there. And they began, two of them, to cajole the members of the Klan and Nazis to organize a coalition to mount a major physical attack against the people in the Workers' Viewpoint Organization. In the meantime, the Workers' Viewpoint Organization people, taking such heart from the success of their demonstration against the Birth of the Nation, decided they were going to hold a major public march down the main streets of Greensboro called Death to the Klan. And so the two of these things were going on at the same time, and Bernard Butkovich, in the meeting on the 22nd of September of 1979, out at the farmhouse, openly advocated that the Klan and Nazis join together to form a new organization called the United Racist Front, and that they arm themselves and go and attack this demonstration. And Eddie Dawson said over and over again, you heard him say at least 3 times, that he was reported by people that were in the meeting of saying, I can tell you this, that I'm definitely going to bring my guns when we go there to attack these people. And the whole thing was recorded by the Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms Division. But at no time was any of this evidence introduced in the trial, either the state trial or now it was coming up to the trial of the federal civil rights counts against them, and that given the refusal of the Reagan and Bush administration to charge the actual effective statute in limiting the jury to, which was another all-white jury. There was an all-white state jury and an all-white federal jury in those 2 cases. And they were acquitted of those charges by the federal in the federal civil rights case. So we moved forward with our federal civil rights suit, which had been held in abeyance. The federal judge in Greensboro refused to allow us to go forward with any discovery so long as the state criminal trial was pending And then, when the federal criminal trial was pending, he also stopped us from taking any depositions at all. Wouldn't allow any document discovery, wouldn't allow any. So we filed to have an out-of-state federal judge brought in to sit on this case. And the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals selected Robert Marriage from Richmond, Virginia, to come in to sit on this case. So we pursued our case in front of Judge Marriage, and we continued our investigation, which was basically a criminal investigation, and we developed sources that were inside the Justice Department, inside the Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms Division, inside the FBI, and other places that were outraged at what it was that was going on here and what the Reagan and Bush administration were doing. So they began to give us information, and we learned that the American Nazi Party had organized, and they had taken the position that if, in fact, in the federal civil rights case that was being prosecuted against the Klan and Nazi members, if anybody was convicted of that, they were going to rent private planes and fly over the Morningside Homes area where this demonstration had been attacked, and they were going to drop metal ball bearings out of the airplanes into the black neighborhood in retaliation for any conviction of any one of the Klan or Nazi guys. And we also learned we'd also learned that they were going to be setting off napalm charges around the black community. And so after investigating this, Bill Taylor and I went to sit down with Harold Covington, who was the leader of the American Nazi Party in North Carolina. We went up into Asheville, up into the mountains, to meet with him at this hotel. And Bill Taylor and I were there, and Harold Covington had his wife with him. And we were sitting there trying to explain to him that, look, we knew all about what was getting ready to be done. And if, in fact, it took place, they were all going to be charged criminally, and that we all knew who they were. And so that we were giving them a chance not to do this because we wanted to take every step we could conceivably take to make certain that this didn't happen. And he laughed at us and started telling us about a shootout that he had had with the North Carolina State Police to try to show that they were not in cahoots with the police, and that he was talking about sitting in a farmhouse window with his .30-30 firing at the state police. And his little wife was sitting there, and Billy Taylor turned to her and he said, and gee, dear, he said, where were you when all this was going on? She says, well, I was sitting right in the other window, returning fire. She said, so we were going, what are we doing here in this meeting with these people? And fortunately, Billy Taylor had gone to the men's room when Harold Covington said that, that if any of those people are convicted, the U.S. attorneys are going to go home and find their children hanging on a meat hook. Now, you don't say things like that around Bill Taylor. I can absolutely guarantee that. Fortunately, he was not there, and so I did not communicate that to him. But we left the meeting, and we knew that Bill had done the investigation. He found out that there was a particular garage where the Hells Angels, some of whom were members of the Klan, and some of them were members of the Nazi Party. There was a garage where the Hells Angels tend to hang out with their motorcycles, that they had ordered 50-gallon drums of this Johnny hand cleaner, which is this kind of chemical goo that you wash grease and stuff off with. And it was clear that that's what they were going to be using for the napalm, to blow up those barrels, and they light on fire and you can't get it off from you. And so Bill Taylor went over to the garage where these people were, drove over there, and got out of his car, in his slacks and shoes you can see your face in, and his jacket with his Marine Corps little pin. And he goes over to the garage, and he walks in, and he comes to the guy who's the head of the garage there, and he's got like about 5 or 6 of these nasty-looking Hells Angels guys standing all around him. And Bill says to him, look, I just want to let you know that we know that you guys have bought these 50 50-gallon drums of this Johnny hand wash stuff, and we know that that you guys are going to try to blow up these things if anybody's convicted in this federal civil rights case. And I just wanted to let you know that I'm the chief investigator for the defendants or the plaintiffs in this lawsuit, and that if it happens, we're going to know where to come. And so the guy turns around and takes a big swing at Billy Taylor. At which point Billy Taylor, cold cocks him, just knocks him cold just like that, knocks him down like that. So when Billy saw him coming, he'd taken his glasses off and tossed him to a side, and he knocks this guy cold, and he turns around and walks out, gets in his car and starts to drive away, and he gets a couple miles away, and he says, "Oh, shit, I forgot my glasses." And there are these $300 prescription glasses that he's got. So he turns around, he drives all the way back. Not many people would have done that. But he turns around, he drives all the way back there. And he walks into the garage, and here are these guys kind of snarling and pawing the ground. And he says, "Look, I don't want any trouble with you guys, but these are $300 pair of glasses here, and I got to get them back." So he goes over to get them. And this guy that he had cold cocked picks up a big wrench like this and turns out starts to come at Billy like this. So Billy just reaches around, he picks up this anvil and crushes the guy like that. Just hit him right on top of the chest and just crushed him flat and killed him deader than shit, just like that, right in front of everybody. They all went, "Whoa, what was that?" And then he turns around and puts his glasses back on and walks out. So we had some good investigative people working with us on this particular case, and we had some excellent sources that were being developed. So we developed this information, and we brought the trial on, and we began to take depositions of all of them. And as it turns out, that what had happened is that the Workers' Viewpoint Organization people, now Communist Workers' Party people, wanted to insist upon amending the complaint to charge that this was an intentional criminal conspiracy to assassinate them as the vanguard of the working class in America. I was suggesting that a more moderate position might be more appropriate, saying that that what had happened is they'd come in to try to investigate the potential sale of arms from the 2506 Brigade to the American Nazi Party, and that what they had done is they'd gotten involved in this, and what actually happened was Bernard Bukovich was trying to instigate them to attack this anti-Klan march on the grounds that he was hoping that the Nazi Party would then go and get the automatic weapons that they had. And as soon as they went and got the automatic weapons and started distributing them out to these guys that were going to attack the parade, then they would arrest them for unlawful possession of automatic weapons, right? But as it turns out, they didn't go get automatic weapons. What they did is they went and got their handguns and shotguns and hunting rifles and stuff and brought those to the march. And so Bernard Bukovich said basically, "Well, I guess that's that. I guess we don't have any jurisdiction here. They're getting set to go and attack and kill these people, but it's not a federal issue, it's just a state issue. And since the police department knows all about it, I don't need to inform anybody." And he asserts that he therefore then just got up and left town, which turns out not to be true, but he said he did. And so what we did is we began taking depositions of them. And what I was going after, I've always maintained this position, that the fact is all down through the ages of the human family, there have always been individuals who would come and try to hit you on your head and take away whatever you had. Steal your wallet, steal your pocketbook, take, your cow. They've always had people like that. But when the state becomes involved in it, in promoting that kind of conduct or protecting the kind of people that engage in that conduct, it's a crime of a different caliber. And so therefore, I was focused primarily on this issue of the police department involvement and the involvement of the Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms Division and the FBI undercover agent. I was after them. And the Workers' Viewpoint people, hated the Nazi Party and hated the Klan. Because, as you know, in World War II, prior to the outbreak of World War II, in Germany, there were these major street fights going on between the Nazi Party and the Communist Party in Germany. There's this long, deep, abiding hatred that they have for each other because they're dialecticians. They're both adherents to the second paradigm dialectical worldview, where they derive their basic sense of self-value from their confrontation with the ultimate other. And so they're both kind of, different sides of the same coin. They have the same worldview, basically. Though both of them will deny it. But the fact of the matter is, so there was this deep abiding hatred of the Klan and Nazis, and they wanted them all prosecuted for murder and sent to prison for life and all of that. And here I was trying to steer away, trying to get at the police department and at the feds for doing this. And when they realized that I was trying to get the feds prosecuted, they all lit right up and said, oh, good, let's amend the complaint and charge them with intentionally assassinating us. That the state has intentionally assassinated us because they must realize, as we do, that we are the vanguard of the working class in America. And I was going, spare me, please, but definitely spare the jury, that kind of an argument, because you're going to lose on a thing like that. So I was proceeding forward, trying to get this information from them, and I went after them, and I found out that there was this guy, Gerald Rooster Cooper, who was the detective in the Greensboro Police Department that was the control officer for Eddie Dawson, who was inside the Ku Klux Klan. I found out that who the FBI agent was that was controlling, is the FBI agent controlling Eddie Dawson as an FBI informant. And I found out who the superior was of Bernard Butkovich that was controlling him from the Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms Division. I began going after them in discovery. And a very strange thing began to develop, that Bob Marriage, who had been sent in out of Virginia to try this case, started becoming very, very irritated at the effort to try to entangle the FBI and the Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms Division in this conspiracy. That he actually went to the point of pulling us, stopping the hearing at one point, and calling all of us who were plaintiffs' counsel into chambers, and he said, look, you've got to stop doing this. He said, look, the Klan, sure. The American Nazi Party, sure. Greensboro Police Department, probably, but not my government. Not my government. Not the Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms Division, not the FBI. I'm not going to let you have them. And I said, but Your Honor, we've charged them. They're not immunized. You've made that ruling yourself. We have to be able to develop the evidence. I said, let me take the deposition of Bernard Butkovich to prove to you what he did in the meeting on September 22nd, of instigating these people to come together and instigating them to attack this demonstration. And he said, yes, but your plaintiffs are arguing that they did it on purpose to try to assassinate them. You're not arguing that it was just an accident on his part, because he may not be responsible if it's just negligent. Under the Civil Rights Act, you have to prove that it was intentional. I said, well, that's the purpose of the deposition. And he said, look, I'll give you this one deposition. So I take the deposition of Bernard Butkovich, and he comes on, and he says that he doesn't remember really anything that happened in the meeting on the 22nd. Doesn't remember what he said, doesn't remember if he said anything, doesn't remember how the vote was taken, whose idea it was to form this United Racist Front. And then I said to him, I said, well, in fact, weren't you wearing body mics at the time? Oh, absolutely not. No, I was not. I was not wearing body mics at the time. I said, really? I said, then how do you account for this? Which I take out and show him, which is a administrative sign-out sheet for you signing out for the body mics on that day. Justice Department lawyer said, where did you get that? And I said, that's not the point where I got it. I said, the question is, what does the witness say about that? And he looks at it, and I said, does that refresh your recollection? Oh, right, he said, right. Yes, I did have them on, but the batteries died. The batteries died. I remember that now. The batteries died, and so therefore nothing was recorded. And I said, really? Then how do you account for this? Which is the affidavit from David Lazar from the Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms Division, who sat in the car and monitored over the radio everything that was going on in the meeting from your mics. And he says, You're right. You're right. I guess what I did is I changed the batteries. The batteries did die, but I changed them. I went out of the meeting and I changed them. I said, which you had forgotten up until now? You're right. I forgot that, but I changed them so it was being broadcast, but they were not. But they were not, in fact, recorded. That all that says is that he was monitoring it out in the car. And so it wasn't recorded. I remember that now. And I said, really? I said, then how do you explain this? Which is the administrative filing of the tapes for the recordings from that particular meeting. And he said, well, keeping those tapes, that's not my responsibility, he said. I said, I didn't ask you whether it was your responsibility. I said, I asked you, you said that they weren't recorded, and here are the filings for the recordings. So we stopped the deposition, and I go to Bob Marriage, and I asked Bob Marriage to give me a subpoena to the Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms Division to get the tapes. And so Bob Marriage very reluctantly agrees to sign the subpoena. We issue the subpoena to the Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms Division, and they come back with an affidavit signed saying that they were destroyed. And I said, Your Honor, I'd like to take the deposition of the custodian of these to find out, if they were destroyed or why they were destroyed, who ordered them to be destroyed. And he said, no, that's it. That's it. He said, look, you're not going to go any farther on this. They said that they were destroyed. So you're going to have to rely upon his memory of what happened at the meeting. And so I said, I've got 3 different witnesses that all testify that he's the one that, in fact, advocated them attacking the demonstration. And he said, look, this is kind of ancillary to your major charges. You're basically charging the Klansmen and the Nazi guys who came and attacked them in the police department for not protecting them. That's the basic case you've got here. I said, no, there are 14 counts in this complaint, and 4 of these counts are against the feds for what they did here, of instigating this thing. And he said, look, you can take me up on appeal, but I'm not going to give you that. He said, you're going to get the Klan and Nazi guys, and you'll probably get the city here for this, the police department. It'll be the first case in the entire history of the United States where police department officials have been held liable for working with the Klan. He said, that's going to be plenty for you. Like as if we're, negotiating for a loaf of bread or something here. So he wouldn't allow us to have the additional discovery on these people. So we go forward and we present this information. We start to impanel the jury. The jury, even though there's like 32% black people in this particular jurisdiction, they have less than 6% of the people in the prospective jury pool who are black. Because what they've used is the water bills as the basis for figuring out who's going to be on the juries. And water bills are always issued in the name of people who own the houses. And because a lot of the black people didn't have money to own their house, they only rented the house, they didn't have the water bills in their name. And so therefore they weren't in the jury pool. And so we brought on a motion to challenge the jury panel. He denied that. And so we went on with the trial that had like only one black person on the jury. And the jury ended up, however, finding them liable, finding the Klan and Nazi Party people liable, having the. But when I was doing depositions, I remember that this guy by the name of Woods, that was one of the Klan guys. I brought him to the deposition. He comes into the deposition. He sits down at the deposition, and he's got this little 5 little silver skulls on his lapel and a pin. And so I sat down at the deposition. I said, "Excuse me." I said, "Can you tell me what that pin is?" He said, "These are the skulls of the dead commies that we killed at Greensboro." So I said, "Gee," I said, I'm trying not to really dislike you personally." I said, "I'm trying to just figure out what happened in this case." And he said, "I don't give a shit whether you like me or not," he said. I said, well, I'm glad. And so the city attorney who was representing them, the city attorney was representing the Klan and Nazi guys. That he said, listen, okay, stop this line of questioning. This can't get us anywhere. And so I made the mistake of turning around and saying, look, if I want any shit out of you, I'll squeeze your head. And it was unfortunately on the record. And so he said, that's outrageous. He said, we're going to the judge, he said. And he got up and he prances out and he goes on into to Bob Marriage, And so Marriage comes back in. He said, Dan, come here. He says, so I go outside and I'm standing outside and he said, now look, you got to control yourself on this. He said, look, you guys are winning this thing. You're going to get the state. You're going to get the city. You're going to get the Klan Nazis. You got to control yourself on this, okay? And so I said, okay, look, Your Honor, I'm sorry. Sorry I did. I'll apologize to you. I'm not going to apologize to him, but I'll apologize to you. So he said, okay, that's good enough. So we go back in, and so I said, look, I'd like to get Butkovich in for a return. He said, look, I thought I told you not to keep going there. I said, but there's another matter that we've got. With him. He said, okay, but let's make this be the last. So we bring Bernard Butkovich back in. We sit him down. And I said to Butkovich, I said, listen, you said that in your earlier deposition, you said that when, as soon as you realized that the Klan and Nazis had gone to get their regular rifles and shotguns and handguns and hadn't gone to get automatic weapons, that you had decided that you'd just wash your hands of this and that it wasn't necessary for you to do anything further. And that's right. And I said, and you said that you did what? You went back to Ohio? You went back to Charlotte, where Robert Dukes was, your superior? Well, what did you do? He said, I just left the city. I said, really? You left the city? I said, then how do you account for this, which is your handwritten memo to your superior, Robert Dukes, explaining how you went down and stood and watched the Klan and Nazi guys come in and shoot these people down? How do you account for that? And the U.S. attorney leaped to his feet and said, this is outrageous. You've got somebody inside the Justice Department. I'm going to Judge Marriage. And he prances out and he goes to Judge Marriage. And he starts screaming and hollering about how we're getting unlawful access to internal files. And so Bob Marriage comes back over to the door and he goes, Dan, over here. So I go back out. We go back to his chambers. He said, look, where did you get that? And I said, they gave it to us in discovery. The stupid shits. I said, you know how stupid they are. I said, they gave it to us in discovery. It was a document that they gave to us. And he said, oh, this is outrageous. He said, look, but I don't want you to go anywhere with that. Give that back to me. Give that back to me, he said. I said, Your Honor, I said, this is something we were given in discovery. It's proving that he's committing perjury, under oath. He said, okay, so he's committing perjury, but that doesn't really prove that, that they did this on purpose, which is what your plaintiffs keep on saying here, And he kept making this pitch to me, like you got this set of really radical plaintiffs that are, now Communist Workers' Party people, and they're taking these really ideological positions. You and I know better than to do something like that. Now here, give me that back. And so I said, well, here, Your Honor, take it. I said, so I go back in and I pull out a copy of it and I say to Barkovich, I say, okay, I'd like to enter this now as evidence against you for committing perjury in this case. And I said, I'd like to ask you something about this guy, Robert Dukes, who is your superior. You say he's the guy that sent you in here? He said, yes. And I said, can you tell me whether he served in the military? He looks at me like this and he said, well, yes, he did. I said, wasn't he in fact stationed in Vietnam? He said, yes, I believe he was. And I said, and can you tell me, wasn't he in fact a member of the Phoenix Project? There was a professional assassination unit to kill communists in Southeast Asia. And the U.S. attorney jumped up and started screaming, saying, this is national security information. You're not allowed to have any of that. Where'd you get that? Blah, blah, blah. And they wouldn't let us put that in either. But it turns out that I was taking a line that turns out to be more conservative than I really ought to have been taking in the case. Because it turns out that the guy who, from Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, who'd been in there since the Nixon administration, had in fact been a member of the Phoenix program, was in fact the guy that sent Bernard Bukovich into the Nazi Party. Bukovich was the guy that organized the Klan and Nazis together into the United Racist Front. He is the guy that instigated them into going into attacking this demonstration. And he's the one in cahoots with Eddie Dawson who told them to bring their guns. And he's the one who in fact notified no one about this except his superior Robert Dukes, that this was getting ready to happen and that he wasn't doing anything about it. And he stood right there and watched them shoot these kids down and never did anything about it. So that set of facts itself would sustain an actual finding against them that they had in fact actively conspired to attack those people and kill them. And it turns out that of the 5 people shot and killed, that 3 of them were shot right straight in the head. Out of all the different demonstrators, the Klan and Nazi guys went right straight to the leaders of the Workers' Viewpoint organization and shot them dead in the head. And the other one, 2 of them shot right in the heart, all 5 of them. And so that any reasonable jury could have reasonably inferred from that these people were targeted, that they were selected out and assassinated on purpose, because these were the people that were shot and killed. And yet Judge Marriage would not let us have that evidence to put in to the jury. But the jury in any event concluded that they were liable for attacking this demonstration and killing these people. They did in fact find that the Greensboro Police Department was liable, and the city was liable, and the individual police officers and detectives were liable to the plaintiffs in this case. And they would not allow us, however, to have punitive damages because they said punitive damages were not appropriate. Judge Marriage ruled against a city, and they didn't provide any punitive damages against the Klan or Nazis in the verdict. So we won a $350,000 verdict for Marty Nathan. There were others, $5,000, $6,000, $8,000 apiece awarded for medical damages for some of the other people who were shot, who survived. But very importantly, as I say, it was Bob Marriage was right that it was the first case in American history where a city police department was found to be liable for colluding with the Ku Klux Klan in murdering civil rights workers. So it stands as that precedent in American history, and there's a lot of rulings that Judge Marriage did make against the Klan and Nazis, against the city police and everybody else that stand as very important precedents from this point forward to be able to recover damages in these types of conspiracies. So that's the Greensboro case that we did. It's a little different than a lot of the other cases we did, with the exception of this peculiar overtone that this guy, Robert Dukes, was in fact a member of the Phoenix program, and he's the one that sent in Bukovich, who was the one that instigated these killings. But we never did get to the point where I was convinced that that was exactly what it is that was intended to be done. It seemed to me that this was one of those types of operations that they were instigating because of a willful and wanton recklessness and a disregard for the value of the lives of these people because they were communists, or because they were labor union people, or because they were actually organizing publicly on behalf of black rights. And it was clear that the people in the Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms Division, in FBI and others, harbored a very similar attitude toward those people who were killed. And so their disregard for their health and safety was, in my opinion, a proximate result of their their class-based, invidious, discriminatory animus toward these people, and they should have had a finding against them for that.
I think we could probably show this thing. If people just kind of scrunch in a little bit.
What?
You might be able to get it.
Did you get it up on the system?
No, unfortunately, we can't.
Okay.
Let me just.
I think you can watch it individually.
Yeah. I'll tell you what you do. Look at just go to. Yes.
Danny, could you?
Well, let's finish this thing first.
No. You, while they're figuring that out, could you talk about the kind of work that these people were doing, the kind of people that they were? Because, quite frankly, the public education and fundraising aspects of this were a nightmare, as far as I was concerned, because of the ideology that they were putting forth. It was just not appealing to the most American citizens, and so it was really a difficult case from a public education point of view. But the thing is that it was striking, I think, when people realized the quality of the characters and the kind of work they were doing inside the union, and the kind of free medical services that they were providing to these workers who had no medical help for all this horrible brown lung stuff that they were dying from. And you know, so it was very poignant, the stories of these characters that they killed.
Yeah, no, that's true. I mean, the folks, when you talk with the folks, they were extraordinarily kind. They were extremely compassionate and affectionate kids. Now, I want to be very careful, because I'm not just saying all of this kind of stuff so you think it's okay for them to have been communists. You know, I mean, the reality is that these were extraordinarily high-minded people, in doctors and professors, in college graduates, very, very intelligent people who gave up very major professional positions to come down to try to work with the workers in those mills to try to help them to challenge this brown lung epidemic that was going on down there. And the fact that they had become as adversarial as they did with the Ku Klux Klan, I mean, as I can point out, I mean, even when I got right face to face with you know, the Grand Dragon of the Ku Klux Klan and stuff, that it was not only very hard for me to contain myself so as not to become ad hominem toward him, but in fact that I actually succumbed to that temptation. You know, I mean, that I would have just as soon kicked the crap out of the guy. You know, and here I was at Jesuit National Headquarters, the Christic Institute, you know, and here we are. You know, I'm wanting to throttle this guy because I'm looking right at him, you know. So, I mean, the people from the Workers' Viewpoint Organization who were having to deal with these people, you know, daily, you know, threatening them and calling them niggers and nigger lovers and all that kind of stuff, you know, that they had gotten caught up in this dialectic with them, except that I need to add that their own particular communist ideology inevitably leads them into that type of a dialectic. You know, it's the old saying that the communists believe that the revolution will not be won until the last capitalist is hung on the intestines of the last liberal. You know. So the reality of this thing is that there is and we'll get to this issue as we get into the last couple weeks of classes, where we're trying to discuss, you know, what in fact is going on here. You know, what is it that is reflected in all of these cases? What are these different worldviews that people have? What is it? Why is it that it causes them to do some of the kind of things they do, both the bad guys and the good guys that we represent? We'll discuss all of that. But the reality is that these people that were in the Workers' Viewpoint Organization, that under duress changed their name to the Communist Workers' Party, are just as dignified and just as nice a group of people as you would ever want to meet. And so that all of this demonizing that goes on about them, and the same thing cannot be said about Klan members. and American Nazi Party members. They are not nice people. You know? So this was a pretty clear case of good guys and bad guys. So, then let's check to the students here first, see what, I'm sure you're bubbling over with lots of questions. No. Yes.
Did the police that were assessed for damages and stuff at the end, did any of them like lose their jobs or like any?
No. In fact, the city of Greensboro paid for all of their expenses and paid all the fines and paid the fines for the Klan members and for the Nazi Party members. The city of Greensboro paid their fines, and in this case, the judgments against them.
You guys used the press a lot when you did the Karen Silkwood case. Did you guys try to do a similar tactic in this one? Did you try and speak more?
Well, that was the point that Sarah was raising here. It made it difficult. It made it difficult because there was an insistence that any type of public statements being made about the case go through this kind of doctrine test. There were committees that they had, and that they had to clear it with them, and that nobody was allowed to speak out and say things that they felt, it had to be cleared by the party and all that kind of stuff. And so all we had to do is just sit back and say, look, we'd be perfectly happy to tell people about what we feel about this, but that's not what you want said. You want this other stuff said, that you're the vanguard of the working class and that you've been targeted and assassinated by the state, blah, blah, and that in good luck, go ahead and say that. And they used to be saying it all the time. Nothing in the papers anywhere about any of that stuff. The newspaper just wouldn't pick it up at all, which doesn't necessarily mean that they shouldn't have, just that they weren't. And so that we ended up not playing a very major role in getting out the information and publicity about this. And it wasn't covered that thoroughly, except for the victory that we won, which went out on the news about that.
I'm just a little confused as to why the judge was playing that role of preventing you from bringing the perjury charges against the ATF agent.
It was clear that Bob Marriage, at this particular point in his career, had come to a certain set of conclusions about the way the world is. And that and he had actually, in Virginia, had returned a number of very strong verdicts and stuff, in judgments and opinions against Klan and Nazi people and racism and stuff, and ruled to integrate schools. He'd had to have U.S. Marshals surrounding his house and protecting him from people. And so he had gotten into coming to an accommodation in his own mind with how bad the Klan and Nazis and all that were, and that he'd even had some sense about what police were like, But he not only couldn't come to grips with the fact that these people had done what they had obviously done here, and I personally believe that if I'd been allowed in that case to make the argument that I was comfortable making, that we could have gotten a jury verdict against them for reckless and wanton disregard for the health and safety of the people, and because of their animus toward them as communists and labor organizers and black civil rights workers. I think we could have, but that wasn't my call to make, and that the plaintiffs were adamant that a different line be taken, and in my opinion fell short of what it could have gotten.
What is the responsibility of a constitutional attorney, really, that in a case like this, in a situation like this?
Well, it varies. As you know from the reading about the cause lawyers, there are these at least 3 different categories of cause lawyers, and that I tend to be in the middle of this thing. The cause lawyers on the extreme left are the ones. Lewis Pitts, for example, one of our lawyers at our office, Lewis Pitts, is very clearly a 3rd category people's lawyer. Right down in, work with them side by side, do the organizing pamphlets going out, stand up in court and represent them, and all that kind of stuff. And I assume that those lawyers, I know those lawyers, as a matter of fact, feel toward me more or less like I feel toward the lawyers to my right, that are kind of like the normal public interest lawyers or public defenders or legal services people, you know, that I basically don't think that they go far enough. I think that they don't adequately personalize their commitment to getting things done. They're kind of institutional servants, but they don't really take up the cause as though they should. And I'm sure that Lewis feels that way. He was very clear about it with me. And Dennis Cunningham was that way too. Dennis was brought in by Lewis out of Chicago to help on this case, and they all tend to view lawyers such as me who want to get major principles established, major constitutional changes, structural things to basically make the system work the way it promises to do. A lot of those lawyers don't believe that the system is really dedicated to doing that at all, that it's a big show, and that unless you can basically show all the people in the country that the state is in the hands of the 1% that are running everything for their benefit, you're not doing your job. And so it became an issue in this particular case, probably more than any other case that we've done. But everybody respected each other's, you know, perspective on this. And since the plaintiffs insisted upon taking this line in the case, that was the appropriate thing to do.
What did you say when I said I didn't want to do this case because I didn't like the ideological aspects of it and the difficulties that
I said the perfectly obvious thing. I said, look, if you allow a Ku Klux Klan and American Nazi Party people to drive up in 10 cars in a caravan and gun down on national television peaceful demonstrators on an American city street with permits to demonstrate, and they're acquitted by an all-white jury, and to allow that to be done when the police and the federal officials are clearly in collusion with them, that no one is safe in the country. No one is safe, because it's just a matter of, you know, who that particular coalition of people feel they ought to go after. And the reality is that they will continue going after people, you know, further and further and further toward the center. They're insatiable. Is that if anyone doesn't agree with their right-wing ideology, they are enemies. And so that from both a theoretical perspective, you are not only at risk if you don't come to the defense of people at the front end on that, but from a more existential point of view, that will just the creeping danger will just come and get everybody.
Was it an executive order, or what did Reagan do specifically to alter the Civil Rights Act?
No, what they did is they had the Justice Department adopt a particular theory in their case, that even though the investigation had begun by Drew Days, and if Drew Days had stayed in charge of the prosecution, he would have asked the jury to be instructed that if you find that these people were attacked simply because they were demonstrating on behalf of the rights of black people, that you can find them, the bad guys, to be liable. But the administration of the Justice Department wouldn't do that. They took this entirely crabbed attitude toward the Civil Rights Act, and therefore made it almost impossible to prove that in fact, for any of the people that weren't black that were shot, it would be impossible to recover, because they obviously weren't shot just because they were black, you know. And so for Sandy Smith and the other two that were killed that were black, you know, they would have had to have been killed just because they were black. In a sense, like walking down the street random and killing somebody just because they're black. Not because they're organizing or they're demonstrating or speaking out or anything. All of that, in a sense, constitutes a defense. And so that's what they did. Now, one of the many things that the Reagan and Bush administration did, for which they came to pay eventually.
So can the computer be in the middle so people can see, and everybody that's got computers can go to it?
We'll do it next class. We'll start the next class.
Yeah, okay.
It's 7:30.
Okay. So anyway, so that's the Greensboro civil rights case, and we'll deal with the Mayor Eddie Carthan murder trial down in Chula, Mississippi, on Thursday. Okay, great. Thank you, guys.
Quick question: how's the workload? How's the lead? Are you guys falling behind? Is it too much? Is it adequate?